What's going on, everyone? ScizGraff here. Welcome to episode 10, I believe, of our Graffiti Freight Train Watching series. What this series is, we take a look at all the great pieces on freights, the throw-ups, the tags, all that good stuff. Get inspired a little bit by it, try and learn from a lot of the great artwork that is on these sort of moving art galleries that are on display all across the continent for those who are smart enough to see it and look at it. So let's get right into it. Our first piece here. I really appreciate that they chose to do this on a car with a blue background, actually, because I think this color scheme looks even more beefed up with that. Something else I really like about this is just the 3D that they've used in the background with the pink and orange there. 3D for background stuff is awesome. And also, I don't know how faded out it looks on the camera, but that's a 14 there. 2014, real old piece. Great to see that. We love seeing the old pieces here, and it's extra nice to run into some old pieces. That being said, it's also extra nice to run into some new pieces. I'm still going to try and show you guys a lot of the, Markall work here. Some of the really great hand styles like this. Absolutely beautiful. It's very uniform. With the top sort of, I don't want to call them flares, they're too small to be flares, but that's how you create a good tag right there. Everyone recognizes him probably. Crack ain't whack. Well, I don't know, I think a lot of people would argue with that, but as much as I could talk about that topic for a long time, I won't, because I sort of wanted to say I took a quick jog earlier when I found this line of tankers, or not tankers, when I found this line of freights, just to see what was on them, and I was a bit disappointed at how little there is to show off on here. So normally I split each side of the cars into a single episode, but today we're going to combine them and do both sides of these freights. GUK is a big crew, actually, I believe. Great stuff there. That's an awesome little hand style right there. Something like itch, I don't know. I always make myself look like an idiot when I read things wrong on the camera, and then I always catch it in edit. I'm like, no, that obviously doesn't say that, but whatever. All across the continent, you'll see that. Being that there's a lot of empty cars on this line, I'm obviously sort of going to skip over a lot of them, but I did want to take the opportunity to sort of use the emptiness and the bare cars here to talk about what it's like being in a small town in terms of the graffiti scene, and what the graffiti scene is like when you're in a small town. Because I know with the reaches of the internet specifically over the past 2 decades, the popularity of graffiti in non-urban environments has really exploded, like even more so than it has in urban environments. As someone who was lucky enough to have YouTube sort of recommend, once upon a time, 12 or 13 years ago, a graffiti related video when I knew nothing about graffiti. Beautiful little throw up down here, by the way. 604. Someone let me know what area code that is, because I know some of you gotta know. But yeah, that was my first exposure to graffiti. Oh geez, I know I'm interrupting my own story a lot here, but 2011 by Theory. That's wonderful to see, that's really wonderful. The more awesome, maybe, is I still believe that this is like some of the Grominator's work. I have yet to confirm that, but because I haven't seen him do anything with like Markall stuff, but whatever. As usual, the broadcaster can be found up on the freights. A lot of the common symbols you see here on the freights. But as I was saying, my first exposure to graffiti was simply through the internet, which more and more people have that experience nowadays. And ask any graffiti artist who lives in sort of smaller areas, and the way they either got into graffiti was usually one of 2 ways. Those being, you either went to a city and were exposed to it there. I believe if you go watch my interview with Smo, I'll try and link that in the corner. It's a long one, but if you want to watch it, it's a good watch. He was saying that he was exposed to it when he was in a big city, which was obviously not the one he lived in. He lived in quite a small town. And it's similar with me. Like, I've grown up in a small town. Awesome deader tag there. Give you a nice look at that. Love that color scheme, yellow with the green outline. Beautiful little color scheme for a throw. There's a lot of new names on here that I haven't seen before. It's great to catch the new names up here, and as you can tell, like it with all the dates on here, these freights are old. So I have a feeling these ones are just sort of freights that have been largely sort of kept somewhere and not moved around too much. I could be way off on that, but especially just with how bare they are in this area. Usually stuff in this area is not bare in the slightest. But being that now it's easier for people in sort of more rural areas to get into graffiti, I thought it might be interesting to talk a little bit about what graffiti is like in very rural areas. Okay, we got Las Vegas under that same symbol. Nice. I love the dual color solid stick that's been used there. I mean, it's clearly two different ones, but you know what I mean. Yes, we got some big miles. Shout out to my other Canadian writers. The big miles tag there, that's traveled roughly 2,000 kilometers to my location from where he blessed that little freight with his tag. It's always nice to see a big name. Largely with a lot of these small towns, there really isn't graffiti on the street, and being that it's a small town, it's that much harder to be prolific. If there are any writers, there's one or two, and it's hard for them to be prolific because the police have nothing else to focus on, right? So it's not the same environment as writing in a populous city, and because of that, a lot of the graffiti writers in rural areas have very different thoughts about how you should be writing graffiti and what kinds of graffiti are acceptable and safe for yourself, sort of. Another beautiful tag by the same guy as I pointed out back near the beginning. And what I mean by that, the safety aspect, is just if you are going to go out and just be prolific in a small town, you're going to have a very bad time, because you know, in small towns they don't have murders to deal with, they don't have like bad crimes to deal with. There's just a lot of low-level stuff that the police basically take care of. Because of that, I think in a lot of small communities there's a much bigger focus on this freight graffiti, and I think that's part of the reason I've really fallen in love with the freights, because there's just stuff on these freights that you can't see anywhere else around the geographical environment that I've grown up in. Glitch going high with that one. Nice to see. I forget where I was talking. It's a very different environment, and it makes you appreciate tags slightly less maybe, and pieces a little bit more. If you see them on freights, you don't see tags as prolifically as much. Let me just stop, give you an awesome view of that. And the reason I'm talking about the differences that people have in terms of what kind of graffiti they really like and really respect, and what kind of graffiti people think everyone should be doing, is because I want to loop this back around to a conversation about graffiti writers sort of being a little less hostile towards each other. My position is one that not many people share, frankly, in the graffiti community. And I just think that a lot of the beef within graffiti is very childish. And people like to think it's not, because, graffiti is done illegally. People are breaking the law, people are risking their freedom, people are risking their jobs, things like that. But the reality of it is that it's just childish no matter what. I don't know if these freights are new, or these tankers are new, so I'm going to show you a few things on here too. But I'm of the position that it is frankly quite childish. And like, I've had my stuff crossed out. I never really retaliate. The longer you're up, the more you're up, the less you're crossed out. But that being said, I think a lot of the reason people get on each other's backs about this is because, frankly, people just aren't necessarily understanding where the other graffiti writer is coming from, in terms of why they write, how they write, why they write more tags than pieces, things like that. Very faded out right there, but that's an important character to get to know. And I feel like if more graffiti writers understood the environments that others were coming from, they would be less irritable and a little more accepting of different kinds of graffiti. I personally believe that all kinds of graffiti are good. There's no such thing as you should only do tags, or you should only do throw-ups, or you should only do mark all work like that, or you should only do pieces, or you should only do legal, or you should only do illegal. Because when people are arguing for all that kind of stuff, they sound childish. They really do. Ooh, that's an awesome little relentless tag. It's like it was done with like one of the mini rollers dragged sideways, something like that. Be like a brush. That's awesome. Slaughter and Dash. Another big Miles up there. And I know I preach this kind of thing all the time, that's an awesome tag. I preach that all the time too. But my point was going to be, I know I preach all the time that there's only good kinds of graph. You should practice them all. They're all great. It's not only because I really do believe that, it's also because there's still so much disagreement in the graffiti community amongst graffiti writers. And graffiti writers should be working together. They shouldn't be getting on each other's asses about what they think is good and what they think isn't. They should be working together. We're all in this for the love of graph. And like obviously the online graffiti community, if you can say that exists, is a totally Theory 2010. I feel bad, there's not many pieces on here, but like I said, that's why I'm doing both sides in this episode, and I have a lot to talk about. Like, especially with the online graffiti community, as I was saying, there's just so much tension between people. Everyone feels like they can say, you know, anything and everything. To anyone else, there's always fights starting in the comments section of every graffiti video, which is ridiculous. But just to round off my point that I'm trying to make here, I do want to make this point, I want to make it very clearly. I feel comfortable taking the unpopular position that graffiti writers need to just sort of back off of each other and have a little more respect for each other. It doesn't matter how long you've been writing. People have different skill levels, obviously. And that's okay. But I don't necessarily agree with the idea that any one graffiti writer is better than another from, you know, a human standpoint. I think a lot of people sort of think, oh, I'm a graffiti writer, I've been doing this for 20 years, I deserve respect. Well, they're right, they do deserve respect, but what they don't seem to understand is that they should respect other graffiti writers also. And the importance of that is, I am of the firm belief that no matter who you are, you're no more important than anybody else. I firmly believe that everyone is equally unimportant, frankly. So you should sort of act like it. And ooh, shout out to Spock there. And part of acting like that is showing respect to everybody, no matter their background, no matter their style of graph, no matter what their skill level. I believe also Spock back there is no longer with us, so rest in peace to him if that is true. But I heard that from one of the comments, so sometimes those are incorrect. But yeah, like I understand that a lot of graffiti writers just plain fundamentally believe different things that I'm saying right now, and that's totally fine. And I mean, you can light up the comment section and tell me what you guys think one way or the other. I'm always willing to listen to other people. 2016 there. 2016 is like some of the most recent stuff we've had. Hello. How you doing?
Come here.
Just a dog interrupting us. That is absolutely awesome. So yeah, there's one last, obviously legendary tag, but guess what I'm trying to say to finish the conversation off here, or at least to start the conversation, is what do you guys think and why? Like, it's well and good for everyone to be like, I think this, but rather than say, I think this, I'd like everyone to, if they want to give an opinion on it, say, I think graffiti should be this, or graffiti artists should treat each other this way because, right? Like, that's where people find common ground and at least understand each other. People may not agree, but you know, if you understand the because, you at least are willing to accept the other person's position a little bit. I know this episode of the Freight Watching is a little bit different. Normally we have tons of pieces, freight after freight, benched, some whole cars. I'll link the whole playlist in the corner so that you can see what it's normally like, but I'd really like to hear what everyone thinks about this topic. And you know, if you have a minute, check out some more of the Freight Train Watching episodes where we've done a little bit more analysis of the actual work on the freights and less just talking about the subject. So until my next one, peace.